Actually, I'll start by telling you what I know. Since I was little, these things have been coming out of the walls. They went away for a while, but now they are back, and they are becoming relentless. They come at night when you are alone and in the dark. All of that is in your book, of course, Dr. Grazer. Sorry, Rich. And on your website, Betty. You guys obviously know these things are real, right? Of course, Rich said, while Betty agreed. Then why is your book full of so much bullshit? Who cares who played Dracula and what version of the movie? There are lives on the line here. Betty raised her eyebrows at Rich. And why isn't your website, which seems to be more devoted to giving out practical information, more popular? Rob asked her bluntly. Don't people know how important what you're saying is? Are you doing everything you can to increase your site's awareness? Well, she began. Rich interrupted her. One thing at a time. Betty is doing a remarkable job with what she's doing. You are obviously involved. A great many people are. But the truth is that those of us involved are hardly the majority. Not by a long shot. So most people can't get into this. They cannot believe it. Why should they? They will remain unaffected unless they know someone on the inside. My wife and I are normal people, relatively. Betty is lucky the other women still let her play bridge with them. In fact, they think her spooky website makes her more interesting, but none of them really take it seriously. If they did, then that would be the end of their relationship with her. The people who need to know should be able to seek the information out. As far as I know, she has the only searchable site on the subject. That's just it, Rob said. You have to know what subject you were looking for. I didn't know what they were called when I started looking. But you found it, Betty said. After far too much hassle, no offense. Rich raised his eyebrows at Betty. None taken, she said. This needs to be more accessible to whoever needs it, Rob said to Betty. I agree, but Rich is right. Most people don't care. There are enough horror stories out there for people who are looking for them as a lark, and this just gets blended in with all of that. It's a shame. A shame is an understatement. You know these things kill people, right? You need to make your keywords for a search better or something. Something like faceless monsters come out of walls. I have no face demon. I will add faceless monster on. We are not very experienced with the internet. Rich tried and did a decent job of getting some stuff out there in his books. I only read this one. I didn't know about the other ones. Are they more thorough than this one? Not really, Rich said. In order to get this info out at all, I had to include it with a hodgepodge of bullshit. That was the only way the company would publish it at all. The editor actually tried to take all the unpopular monsters out. I had to add vampires and werewolves into one of the books in order to get them to agree to keep the Cosianth demons in. I even tried once to write a fictitious story about them with more specifics, but it was rejected. I understood. It was a terrible attempt. Fiction is not my forte. I stuck with paranormal phenomenon studies to try and continue to get the subject out to the public in some way or another. Oh, Rob said, feeling a bit guilty for being so antagonistic. He hadn't done much better to really help anyone but himself. They were doing all they could. Duke has a hell of a paranormal research department. I sought it out. Do you go to school? No, Rob dismissed. He had read in the author's note that Richard Grazer was an English professor at Reading U, and he was curious why someone who had studied in Duke's paranormal research department would end up teaching such a bland subject by comparison, but he did not want to get off topic. How are you involved in this exactly? Betty spoke up. We've slept with the lights on for a while now, if you know what I mean. I obviously do. So you're the one? Oh, no, she motioned at Rich to take it away. Rich smiled at her. I'm afraid I'm the one responsible for our less-than-stellar sleeping arrangement. She smiled back at him. Why you? Rob asked him. Why me? Rich didn't want to approach such a sensitive issue with his usual brashness, so he asked, Do you have any ideas why they might come for you? Not really. Rich saw something on Rob's face. If you need information from us, we are happy to give it, but you need to let us know something about your problem, too, for us to offer any profitable insight. Rob sighed. It will sound stupid. Try us, Rich insisted. Well, they visited me since I can remember. I would call on them with a hum. Did you do that? They can be called forth in whatever way gives you the proper energy to summon them. You used a hum. Continue. Rob considered one question answered, if not entirely directly. It was not even a question he had thought of asking. There were more pressing issues. He wanted to skip right ahead to get to some more urgent answers, but he was being led down a path and he would follow it. He just hoped that it ended up somewhere productive, and not just with a shrug and a pat on the back for support. He went on. I stopped calling on them at some point, and my memory of them tells me they got mean. They were like my friends before, I think. It's hard to know for sure from my memories as a little kid what was real and what was a dream, but when I was 10 years old, they came to me for real. They came for me recently, too. I'm lucky to be alive, aren't I? It's hard to know what they're here for, but my dreams told me, in their way, that these things are taking people, killing them. No, it's not just my dreams. The news corroborated with my dreams. This is all real. It is happening. Yes it is, Rich said. It's very new. What is happening now to people? People like us. People like us? Rob repeated. Rich proceeded. When you were a child, they may very well have been your friends. It sounds like they did not like being abandoned by you after they were so faithfully attentive to your need of them. I'm afraid you were probably among the last to be able to befriend them. No child today can do what you did without suffering horrible consequences. Rob didn't mean to be so obvious, but he was making a very skeptical face. He didn't even realize he was making a face at all until Rich stopped speaking. Rob relaxed his face and tried to be completely receptive. After a pause, Rich said, "You are very uncertain of all of what I'm saying. I'm sorry, I'm just wondering how you could possibly know what is going on." "Evidence. There's plenty of it, even in the Duke libraries. That's where I began piecing things together, making some kind of sense out of them." The tea kettle began to quietly whistle, and quickly became a piercing shriek. "I'll be right back." Betty left them to attend to the boiling beverage. "I read about the tribal women in Nepal," Rob offered. "Yes, I was able to get that part published, but it goes back even further. We will get there, but I want you to understand a few things first." "All right. These beings are real. They exist in another world. Who knows what that world is like? They are physical beings, but not completely bound by the laws of physics as you and I know them, but also they are not completely unbound. There are rules that they seem to obey. Light does not actually seem to cause them real harm, but they appear to be sensitive to it. They could come into it if they really wanted to. They also do a good job of going to their object person when that person is alone. There is no other real reason why they could not get their object person from a slumber party other than discretion." Rob pictured a bunch of pigtailed little girls in sleeping bags, passed out in one of the girls' living rooms. The giant monster barged through the wall in his fantasy and grabbed up one of the girls, sleeping bag and all. He could almost hear the high-pitched, hysterical screaming from a room full of startled awake children. Then he imagined it stomping off with the girl back through the hole it had made, and then the wall healing itself up behind it and its prize. The flash fantasy was almost comically ridiculous to him. This discretion indicates an intelligence. This intelligence and other factors indicate a kind of society, a sort of civilization. They seem to be merely obeying the rules. Since light is an irritant for them, that makes it an easy rule to follow, one they would want to follow. They obviously come at night to accommodate that factor. Who is making these rules is the real question. Being discreet is also essential for any species trying to remain undetected. "I saw one once that was different from the others. It was like a shadow. It had facial features, I think. It was one of the ones that came when I was 10, when I was sure it was really happening in my world." Rich nodded. "That thing remains unnamed and unexplained. It is only theorized about. There is a believed hierarchy of some sort over there, on the other side of the wall. Those are the ones believed to be in charge. They are less tangible, less bound to the laws of either world. They are spotted more often than the subordinates. They are confused as vampires and witches and devils. Maybe they are all of those things, however. It is mostly speculation. You just take it in and apply it as you need to. That's how I go about so much of my life. That's a good thing. You must be open to so much of what is out there, and be ready to come across a lot of bullshit. I myself am guilty of dishing it out. I did it with good intentions, and on a folklore level it can be fascinating. But that is all most of it is. Exotic bedtime stories. What's really scary is what can come for you after Mommy and Daddy tell you one of those stories, tuck you in tight, turn off the light, and leave you for the real monsters. Dreams are another way they can come at you. They come when you sleep, it is believed, because the veil of consciousness is narrowed. You become easier to find, more susceptible, less guarded. Rob felt himself shudder a bit. Usually I sleep naked. I'm at my most vulnerable. Exactly. That's the perfect time for them to come. Like you said, they used to come in a friendly way. I, and others, imagine that they can be like any race, in a way. There can be good ones and there can be bad ones. Something is happening between those two sides right now. Something new. Who's to say which side is which? Betty returned with a silver tray with 3 mugs on it, surrounding a tea kettle and a small bowl of sugar cubes. She poured a cup for Rob and asked him how many sugars he liked. He said 2. She picked 2 cubes up with her fingers and plunked them into his serving and handed the steaming mug to him. He thanked her. She said he was welcome, and then poured a cup for her husband and one for herself. She took no sugar in hers and dropped 1 cube into his. "I like 2 cubes as well," Rich said. "She only allows me 1. "He's young, he can have 2. Just don't let it all catch up to you one day," she said to Rob. "I won't." He sipped the tea and told her it was delicious. He was not lying. "It's chamomile. It'll help us relax." After a few more minutes of pleasantries, Rob said to Rich, "They haven't bothered me in years except in dreams, and now all of a sudden they're tracking me down." "Me too," Rich responded. Rob was having confusing feelings about someone else sharing in what he thought was his private world for so long. These were no longer just his monsters in his own immediate life anymore. He was no longer just seeing others interact with them in dreams or hearing reports on the news. This was happening to a very real person, sitting in the same room with him. He was surprised that he felt more pangs of resentment at not being so special after all, than relief in commiserating with someone else who could possibly understand all that he was going through. He tried to throw those feelings away as quickly as he could. They were childish. He was appalled at his own capability of immaturity. "What does it mean?" he asked, trying to sound adult in the presence of a college professor. "Maybe that there's some sort of an imbalance. I had my first visitations from them in my pubescent years. It started when I was 13. They would come when I was at my most distraught. My parents were good people, but they could make me so mad sometimes, especially back then. One night when I was filled with absolute hatred for them and felt like doing something about it, like running away forever, while making up my mind what to do and feeling hopeless, I concentrated all my energy and thoughts on my favorite picture on the wall. It was a copy of Van Gogh's Starry Night. It was framed, and I stared at it until I was filled with the urge to turn off the light and make it a starry night in my room. I did, and at some point, while staring at it in the dark, I must have dozed off. It woke me up when it came for me. I watched it come through the wall. It came to my side of the bed and tilted its head to look at me. Look without any eyes, but I could feel it see me. It cocked its head from side to side. I should have been terrified. I should have screamed for my parents, but I was not afraid. I was filled with adrenaline and was exhilarated with awe at what I was looking back at. I had somehow been expecting it. I don't remember how long it stayed with me, but I know I felt better by the time I saw it go back through the wall. I would summon them mostly, but sometimes they would just show up. It stopped by the time I turned 20 and moved out of the house. I thought that the house may be haunted and that they were bound to it, but in my new apartment they came again, and that time I felt menaced. It hurried away when I turned on my bedside lamp. I had attributed it all to an anxiety about growing up, but when I was accepted to Duke University, I found their paranormal research department and stumbled across a wood carving of one of them. It was a vague depiction, but the description of it was specifically accurate. I couldn't believe it was real, but somehow I wasn't too surprised either. "Did you ever try calling them again after that, kind of like an experiment?" Rob asked. "No, I didn't need to. I knew they would come, but not when I wanted them to, or in the way I wanted them to. I understood my time with them was over. I did not want them in my life anymore. It was a perverse thing that I wanted answers to, but I was not willing to play with it ever again." "You wouldn't want to try to catch one and study it?" "I'm sure you know them better than that. They are not puppets. That invitation you give them is a courtesy, but they don't need it. They are not at your beck and call. However, I don't think they would refuse an invitation, but I think they would decide on what time to show up, and it certainly wouldn't be in some sort of cage connected to gadgets and gizmos. I don't mean to patronize you, but the very idea of accessing them for experimentation is absurd. I know I'm very naive, but there has to be some set of terms that they come on that could trap them. That's my wishful thinking. Maybe there is some way, but I can't even begin to imagine what it could be. They are too elusive. A wall is only so thick, but that dark hole they come out of has a feeling of great depth. In a way, they can pass through matter into another realm. How you could stop them from doing that to get back is beyond me. Why was the last time they came to you so menacing? What changed? I'm not sure exactly. I just knew that it was not pleasant when it came. Its manner was somehow different, the feeling it gave off. I was terrified that time. I still think I was right to be. It wasn't like it is now. The menace has increased exponentially from back then, for everyone involved. Why are certain people involved? Who are we? Have you any theories for that? Yes, based on what I read in your book. You mentioned that there is some sort of sexual interaction that can happen. That's what the tribal women in Nepal would do. I don't know how that could possibly happen. You know what they look like down there. Rich laughed. Yes, like a G.I. Joe action figure. Rob laughed too. I thought of a Ken doll. We obviously had very different childhoods. Rob had taken a sip of his tea and almost spit it across the room at that remark. That made Rich laugh again.